Hey Optimancers, Chris here. In my last video, I did a straight class Warlock build. That build was a Genie-packed Warlock using the Dow choice, which I think is the strongest one for Genie-packed. And in that video, I mentioned that I would be doing a follow-up video where I look at the Fiend-packed Warlock. Now, with the Warlock, we often see one or two levels of Warlock dipped onto another class. I think most commonly the Sorcerer, but we certainly see it reasonably often with Paladins and Bards as well. And a single level dip of like Hexblade, I've seen on pretty much every class in the game. So why would we want to go straight Warlock instead of just dipping it? Because, of course, with two levels of Warlock, you can get Invocations, you can get Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast scales completely independently of your levels in Warlock. Well, the reason why we might want to go straight Warlock is to, number one, get access to higher level subclass features. Now, in the case of something like the Hexblade, I don't think there's a lot of really choice subclass features that come later on. I think it really packs just about all of it into level 1. But there are other Warlock subclasses where we see a lot more given later on through the subclass, and Genie-packed and Fiend-packed are probably the top two, I would say, for that. The other reason why we might want to go straight Warlock is to get access to higher level spells earlier. And the final reason would be to get access to more invocations, because invocations are really good and they often work well with each other. In the case of the Genie-packed Warlock, I just went 20 levels of Warlock. Today, what I'm going to show you is that we can actually, with a Warlock, dip other classes, much like they dip Warlock. I'm also going to show the many ways that a Fiend-packed Warlock build and a Genie-packed Warlock build are going to be very similar. And there are some ways in which they're going to be different. I guess the devil is in the details. Hi, if you like the content on this channel and you'd be interested in supporting me through Patreon, you can do so. There is a link in the video description. Patrons of this channel can see these videos early and without YouTube ads, and my top level patrons join me to play some D&D every month. Today I'd like to thank these top level patrons: Lee LeMay, IGW, Loxodon13, Martz, Math Guy Dave, Matt, Mikkel Precursor, Nathaniel McCauley, Nick Lutz, Nick Simmons, and Odessian. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. So here is our character. We're going to name him Asking for a Fiend. Got optional class features and customize your origin turned on. If they're not available, I don't think that's going to be a big problem. Now, I mentioned with the Genie-packed Warlock that custom lineage is the best option for Warlocks, and that's true regardless of the type of Warlock you make. The reason is because you can get a +2 to an ability score, and then you can take a feat that's going to give you another +1 to that ability score. So you're going to get an 18 starting ability score, never mind the benefits of a half feat. The half feat I chose for the other one was Fey Touch Charisma with command. Same thing here. Getting additional spell slots with Warlocks is fantastic, and it also gives us the ability to upcast that command with our pack slots as we get to higher levels, and command upcasts extremely well, and because it doesn't use concentration, we can do it at the same time as concentrating on other things. Misty Step, also a great thing to have and great thing to be able to cast without using a spell slot, because if we're using pack slots on Misty Step, as we level up, that becomes less and less attractive. We don't want to be spending 5th level spell slots to cast Misty Step. In terms of ability scores, we're just going to go really focused here. Dexterity 15, Constitution 15, Charisma 15, and a +2 to Charisma through our custom lineage, going to give us a 17, plus our Fey Touched, now we have an 18 starting Charisma. In our Dexterity and Constitution, we'll be able to get those both up to 16, giving us the +3 as the character builds. Now, I want to talk a little bit about dipping another class. There are a couple choices here that I think are pretty good for dipping another class. The first one, I would say, is Fighter. Now, that might seem strange because this character is not going to be using weapons at all. But Fighter actually gives us a couple really strong things right off the bat. The first is fighters are proficient in Constitution saving throws. That means that our concentration is more protected right from level 1. This is actually going to save you some build difficulties early on. If you watched the Genie video, you will have seen that it was pretty hard to cover all the things we needed to do with feats, and one level of Fighter relieves that. Speaking of relieving feats, Fighter would also give us armor and shield proficiencies. So then we wouldn't need to worry about the moderately armored feat. So really, Fighter is pretty much saving us 2 feats, though probably at some point we're going to want to get that second primary saving throw proficiency regardless, but we don't need to get it right away, and it's that traffic jam on those early levels for feat selection that would help to ease. The disadvantage, of course, for Fighter is that it's going to slow down our spellcasting progression. The selection I am going to recommend, though, is 1 level in Divine Soul Sorcerer. This is not going to give us armor proficiency, but what it will do is give us that Constitution saving throw proficiency, and it's going to give us a couple first level spell slots as well as first level spells. And when you become a Warlock, of course, your pack magic is going to scale up with your level. So at level 10, you're going to have 2 pack slots, usable once each per short rest, and they're going to be 5th level spells. So that means if you want to cast a first level spell, well, tough. You can't. I mean, with Fey Touched, we could cast Command once, but there are first level spells we would want to cast, but we would never want to spend 5th level slots on them. This is what Sorcerer is going to do for us. So why Divine Soul? Well, there are a couple reasons. The first is that we have better cantrip selection. Second is that we're technically going to get an additional spell known. And the third is Favored of the Gods. So let's look at Favor of the Gods. This is a very strong first level feature. If you fail a saving throw or miss with an attack roll, you can roll 2d4 and add it to the total. 2d4 is going to be on average 5 points, possibly changing the outcome. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. So a +5 to a saving throw or to hit roll, and it is recoverable every short rest. This is very, very helpful. Talk about protecting your concentration. Favor to the Gods, built in, +5 when you need it. And then we're going to get Divine Magic. This is going to give us 1 additional spell known. Now, we're going to select Law here. The thought for this Fiend Pact Warlock is that they're probably infernally bound, so lawful evil. Not that our character is necessarily lawful evil. They are merely stuck in a pact with a lawful evil entity. So I'm going to be selecting Law here. It's going to give us Bless. There's actually 2 spells on this list that I want to have. Bless is definitely one of them. And at first level, Bless is kind of going to be my go-to spell. Thing about Bless, though, is at any level, a first level Bless is still a decent action. So which spells am I taking? I am taking Guidance, Mind Sliver, Minor Illusion, Word of Radiance, Cure Wounds, and Shield. Let me explain why. Guidance should be obvious. Guidance is one of the best cantrips in the game. Add a d4 to an ability check as long as you have a chance to prepare for it beforehand. And I've talked about Guidance 100 times before. I'm not going to keep repeating myself. I think it's pretty common knowledge this is a really good cantrip. Mind Sliver. Mind Sliver doesn't require an attack roll. That means if for some reason we were to say have disadvantage to attack something with a high armor class, Mind Sliver is something we might do even later on. And it's an intelligence saving throw, meaning it's not an easy saving throw. And if they fail, they take d6 damage, scales at the normal levels, but they also get a -d4 on their next saving throw before the end of our next turn. That could affect our next turn, but more likely going to affect a spellcaster before our next turn. Then Minor Illusion, again, talked about many times. This is something that might be useful to us at level 1. It is something I cast a lot less often at higher levels, but that's true of a lot of cantrips. Now, Word of Radiance, this one requires a little more explanation. Why did I take Word of Radiance? Well, this character is going to have 6 cantrips. We're going to have Eldritch Blast. It is going to be our attack cantrip 99% of the time. Mind Sliver probably the other 1%, or maybe 0.9%. And then Word of Radiance, 0.1%. When do we use Word of Radiance? If we are swarmed. Creatures that are tiny, there's no limit to the number that could be within 5 feet of us. So in that weird situation, something like Word of Radiance is huge. And with Word of Radiance, the damage type is reliable and we're not getting friendly fire. I would not be casting Word of Radiance very often at all. But in that weird situation where you're swarmed with enemies, Word of Radiance can take out a ton of those little tiny enemies. And we're going to talk about a little more how being able to take out enemies is going to be very helpful for the temporary hit points of this character. This one might even get more question. Why Cure Wounds? Well, Absorb Elements is actually going to be less important for this character. I'll explain that later. Absorb Elements tends to be something that is more useful to us at higher levels. It would be kind of the obvious choice. Sleep might also be an obvious choice, though since we have Bless, it's not like we don't have anything we can do in combat, and Bless is always okay, right? Like, there's never a combat where you cast Bless and, oh, Bless is useless in this combat. No, it's always useful. Cure Wounds allows us to bring up an ally that went down. That's useful at low levels. At higher levels, there's going to be another use here. And then Shield. And honestly, if we want a really optimized character, it pretty much needs to have Shield on it, because Shield is so effective at increasing your armor class. Reaction lasts around 5 to your armor class, and because we have our Dip and Sorcerer, we'll always have 2 first level spell slots available. Normally, they're going to end up being used on shields. And at first level, it is really straightforward. You're not a powerful character. What are you going to be doing? Well, first round of combat, you're probably going to cast Bless, right? So Bless is kind of our go-to thing right here. And then from there, we'll, throw up Minor Illusion or Mind Sliver. And that's pretty much it. Try to stay back. Try not to get too close to combat. We don't want to be anywhere near melee. We do not have a great armor class at this point. We do not have a lot of hit points at this point. We're just kind of sitting support. That said, I think you will find that Bless has a significant impact on combat and is worthy of your action. And then we are going to multi-class into Warlock. So we'll just be doing 1 level of Sorcerer. So if we were to reverse this and we were doing a Sorlock build, we'd probably be taking 2 levels of Warlock and then be going straight Sorcerer from there. So we will be getting those higher level spells a little bit faster than a Sorlock build. Of course, we will still be a level behind just going straight Warlock. So you can look at the Genie Pact build that is straight Warlock, and this one, I think you'll find this one is stronger defensively, but that Genie Pact Warlock has the advantage of accessing the higher level spells a level earlier. So we will be selecting the Fiend Pact Warlock, of course. Now, I will mention that we're going to be getting proficiency in light armor at this point. So, grab some studded leather, put it on. It's going to still give us just a 14 armor class, but that's better than a 12. What light armor does for us is it qualifies us for moderately armored. So, with our next ability score increase, we can get moderately armored, then we can put on half plate and a shield. As with Genie Pact, we will be heavily relying on pack magic. As a first level Warlock, you have 1 pack slot. It can cast 1 first level spell once. Then it is recovered on a short rest. But as we get to second level, then we're going to get 2 pack slots. And at third level, they cast second level spells. 5th level, they cast third level spells. 7th level, 4th level spells. And then 9th level, 5th level spells. And then they don't scale any higher than that. But starting at 11th level, we start getting additional pack slots. We get a 3rd one at 11th level. Then at 17th level, we get a 4th one. That's the last one we get. So it's very important when you are doing spell selection with pack magic, you have the ability as a Warlock to switch out one of your spells known every time you level up. You want to be clearing out cleaning house from those low level spells and then filling them in with higher level spells as you go up in level. Any patron for Warlock is going to give you an expanded spell list. This does not give you extra spells known. What it does do is it allows some additional selections for those spells, and the selections that are available through Fiend Pact. Burning Hand's a command at level 1. We already have command, so there's no point in taking that. Blindness, Deafness, and Scorching Ray at level 2. Fireball and Stinking Cloud at level 3. Fire Shield and Wall of Fire at level 4. And Flame Strike and Hollow at level 5. Which ones of these are really going to be the ones that we are going to be drawn to? Well, when we get to 5th level, Fireball. Now, I am the first one to say there are better 3rd level spells than Fireball. I'm not sure there are better 3rd level spells than Fireball at level 5, though. What happens, though, is as we go up in level, when I'm level 10, Hypnotic Pattern, still a good spell. Fear, still a good spell. Fly is still a good spell. Fireball, not so great anymore. So, again, this is just like any other Warlock spell. We're going to want to snag this at level 5, and then later on, we're going to get rid of it. Now, Stinking Cloud, if you watch my Genie Pact, you'll know that what we want to do is use Eldritch Blast to move around enemies. Stinking Cloud is something that you could technically move creatures into. Stinking Cloud just isn't that effective. It has no initial effect if you push somebody into it, so we're going to ignore Stinking Cloud. Fire Shield is a decent spell. We'll probably take it, but Wall of Fire, definitely. Wall of Fire is a great way to layer on damage with forced movement. So we are 100% going to be taking advantage of Wall of Fire. And then Flame Strike and Hollow, not really interested in either of those. And our first level feature for Fiend Pact is very interesting. When you reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points, you gain temporary hit points equal to your Charisma modifier plus your Warlock level. So at this point, if we killed something, we would get 5 temporary hit points from it. I mean, 5 temporary hit points is okay. At 2nd level, not bad at all. But when we are a high level Warlock, this is going to be more than 20 temporary hit points every time we reduce a creature to 0 hit points. So we want to be able to do that when we need to. This is another reason why something like Fireball is attractive for this character, because if you have a big bad guy and a bunch of minions, often a Fireball can drop a minion. Just needs to drop 1 minion, we get our temporary hit points. And our first level spell selections, obviously Eldritch Blast. Then we'll grab Mage Hand. You could pick something else if you like, but Mage Hand is useful. We have a pretty good selection now of cantrips. That's 6 cantrips this character has at level 2. Then I'm going to be selecting Burning Hands and Hex, and neither of these spells are spells that I get overly excited about in an extended campaign. But at 2nd level, they're both decent. Hex, I talked about in the Genie Pact. It is more than a 60% increase to our Eldritch Blast damage at this point. It will represent 40% of the total damage that our character can do. Uses our concentration, and we just got a feature where if we reduce enemies to 0 hit points, that we get some temporary hit points. And we want those temporary hit points. Hex will help us get them. Speaking of helping us get them, so will Burning Hands. Burning Hands does 3d6 damage, dex save for half. 15-foot cone means you can probably hit 2 creatures with it. If you're lucky, maybe 3. But what we want to be doing is, this is the thing we want to be casting on things like kobolds or goblins or giant rats. You know, little things. Things it might kill. That's when we would cast Burning Hands. We will be keeping neither of these spells. These spells are not good when we get to higher levels. Still good at this level. Now, one thing I would do differently with this build is the order in which I take Eldritch Invocations. Our last build was really relying right from 3rd level on the ability to do force movement to enemies. This, not so much. We're going to be looking at the main advantages of those force movement things for enemies at later levels. So we can go ahead and take Repelling Blast a little bit later. We're not going to really need it for the first 4 levels of our character. So Agonizing Blast for the additional damage, and then Eldritch Mind to help us maintain concentration, Gives us advantage on Constitution saving throws to maintain your concentration on a spell. One thing I'll also mention about Eldritch Mind, because it often gets compared to Warcaster for good reason, because Warcaster will give you advantage on Constitution saving throws to maintain your concentration on spells when you take damage. Eldritch Mind doesn't have the specification when you take damage. That means if you get caught in something like a sleet storm or you get caught in something like an earthquake, Eldritch Mind still works. Warcaster does not. At level 3, we will be selecting a Pact Boon, and the Pact Boon that we will be selecting is Pact of the Chain. Now, Pact of the Chain is my favorite pact for Warlocks. I don't think it's all that much better than Pact of the Tome or Pact of the Talisman. Even Pact of the Blade can be really good if you build around it. But Pact of the Chain is just my favorite. Why? Because we can get a better familiar. And I already love Find Familiar, but here we can get an imp. And what does an imp do for us? Well, first off, of course, it's fitting, right? We're Pact of the Fiend. But what does it do for us? 10 hit points with damage resistance to all kinds of stuff. Pretty much most of the kinds of damage we will be facing at this level, it will be resistant to. So it really has closer to 20 hit points. With a fly speed of 40 feet, and it can turn invisible at will. It requires one action, and its invisibility doesn't wear off. It only ends if it ends concentration or if it makes an attack. So why is this so good? Well, because the imp can go into melee and it's invisible, so creatures can't see it. It can move around. It doesn't provoke opportunity attacks, and it can provide the help action. So I guess it's a little bit like an owl, except it's going to be a lot harder for enemies to target it, and even if they do, a lot harder for them to kill it. Imp can also change into the form of a rat, a raven, a spider. Note, if it turns into a raven, it gets a 60-foot fly speed if that's an issue. Also, if it comes up, an imp can see in magical darkness. Really, really good familiar. And the other thing we're going to want to do at 3rd level is change one of our invocations. We can change our invocation every time we level up. We're going to go back and reselect Eldritch Mind soon enough. But first off, we are going to get Investment of the Chain Master. What does this do for us? Well, first, the familiar gains either a flying speed or a swimming speed of 40 feet. Well, it already has a flying speed of 40 feet, so I guess our imp can swim now. As a bonus action, you can command the familiar to take the attack action. The familiar's weapon attacks are considered magical for the purposes of overcoming immunity and resistance to non-magical attacks. If the familiar forces a creature to make a saving throw, it uses your spell DC, and when the familiar takes damage, you can use your reaction to grant it resistance against that damage. So this isn't going to remain good as we go up in level, but at 4th level, this is still a reasonable use of our bonus action. So as a bonus action, it can make a sting attack. It does a d4 plus 3 damage, and then it makes a Constitution saving throw that would normally be DC 11, but instead they're going to use our spell DC, which is currently 14, but it will be increasing. So that's 16 points of damage on a hit on average. And what you can do is, on turn 1, your imp turns invisible. On turn 2, you'll use your bonus action, get the imp to attack. 16 points of damage to something. That's not bad for a bonus action. Now, we could have our familiar take the form of a sprite, because every time we cast Find Familiar, we can choose a different form for the fiendish spirit that is our familiar. If we were to choose sprite, we could get a short bow attack. That would give us a ranged attack, and then they would be making a DC 10 Constitution saving throw normally, but it would be our spell DC instead, and if they failed, instead of taking damage, they would be poisoned for a minute. And there is even a small chance they have to get a 5 or lower total on their saving throw, but if they did, they would fall unconscious. Problem with the sprite? 2 hit points. Or if we really want to take some chances, we could do the Pseudo Dragon. The Pseudo Dragon Sting provides a Constitution saving throw or become poisoned for an hour, again using our spell DC, and if they fail that saving throw by 5 or more, then they fall unconscious. So that's actually a significantly better chance than with the sprite, because the sprite, it's 5 or less. In this case, if we have a DC of 14, that means a result of 9 or less would cause them to fall unconscious. But Pseudo Dragon can't turn invisible and has 7 hit points. Now, why do I say that Investment of the Chainmaster doesn't stay good? Well, because that bonus to hit will never increase. So it's plus 6 to hit here at level 4, and it will be plus 6 to hit at level 20. At level 4, plus 6 to hit, not bad at all. At level 20, it's awful. So Investment of the Chainmaster, this is a pretty good amount of damage at this level. Not going to be a great amount of damage as we level up. We will be able to do better with invocations as we move up in level. So we're going to keep it here till we become level 7 as a warlock, level 8 overall. At that point, we're going to have some spells that we're going to want some invocations to work with. Investment of the Chainmaster just isn't going to pay off at that point. At this point, I'd probably grab Mirror Image as a defensive spell. This does not scale, so it is not worth casting 3rd or 4th level spell slots on. Definitely worth casting a 2nd level spell slot on. So we're going to take it, and then eventually we're going to remove it. We are going to get rid of Burning Hands right now, but we still want an Area of Effect damage spell, so we are going to grab Shatter instead. Shatter is going to do about the same amount of damage as an upcast Burning Hands. It's pretty close, but Shatter covers a bigger area, significantly actually bigger area, and it has range. You can cast it up to 60 feet away. Those are 2 big advantages to having Shatter over Burning Hands. I think it's a no-brainer to switch it out. And we're going to grab Blindness, Deafness, use an action. Doesn't use concentration, by the way. And creature hit, generally speaking, you blind them. You're not going to use Deafness on them. You're going to use Blindness on them. And then they have disadvantage on their attack rolls. You have advantage on attack rolls against them. And then at 4th level, we will be getting our ability score improvement, and we're going to get our armor. So we pick the feat, we pick moderately armored, and we are going to increase our dexterity. So moderately armored, we will be wearing half plate, using a shield. If you can't afford half plate for some reason, well, then go with scale mail for now and switch to half plate when you can. Either way, it's a huge increase to our armor class. We were sitting on a 14 armor class. Even with scale mail in the shield, that goes up to 18, and then 19 with half plate in the shield. So this is a massive improvement to armor class. Now our dexterity score goes to 16. That's not actually going to increase our armor class anymore, but it does improve our initiative, and it improves our dexterity saving throws. So at level 5, of course, we get our Eldritch Blast scaling. So we're attacking twice with our Eldritch Blast on a turn with plus 7s to hit, d10 plus 4 damage each time. So our 2 concentration spells at this point are Bless and Hex. Now, the big advantage of Bless is it's more dramatic. Bless gives you more than Hex does. Bless is going to increase your damage more than Hex does, because that d4 bonus to hit is going to give us more hits, and more hits means more damage, and it's going to end up kind of becoming more, a little bit more anyway, than we're going to get from Hex. Furthermore, because we can use Investment of the Chainmaster to get a bonus action attack through our familiar, that can sometimes interfere with Hex, which often eats up our bonus actions. So when we can use Bless, it's a little bit better. The other thing, of course, about Bless is it's affecting 3 targets. So it's maybe better just for us alone, but we're affecting 3 targets. So it is also going to be much better than you casting Hex for 2 of your allies. The disadvantage of Bless compared to Hex is duration. Bless lasts for 1 minute. I get told all the time that I assume a much too difficult adventuring day, and that in their games, they have 1 or 2 combats, and then it's a short rest every time. If that's the case, I'd just cast Bless. I wouldn't cast Hex at all. If you're having longer adventuring days, though, Hex might be the way to go. And then you have your additional pack slots for other things. At this point, though, we're just primarily doing damage and boosting those 36 hit points with some temporaries once in a while of 8 each time we reduce a creature to 0. Let's start building in some different stuff as we get to Warlock 5 and 6. So we'll be jumping 2 levels at a time now. So we're going to go from level 5 to level 7. So we're going to get a third invocation. We'll get our Eldritch Mind back, get that concentration protected again. Our concentration is about to become a lot more important. And then we're going to get Dark One's Own Luck. Starting at 6th level, you can call on your patron to alter fate in your favor. When you make an ability check or a saving throw, you can use this feature to add a d10 to your roll. You can do so after seeing the initial roll, but before any of the roll's effects occur. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. If that sounds familiar, it's because as a Divine Soul Sorcerer, we got Favored of the Gods. That is a similar feature. They're both usable once per rest, whether it's short or long. They both give you a bonus to a check that you missed. In the case of Favored of the Gods, it's a 2d4. In the case of Dark One's Own Luck, it is a d10. Favored of the Gods affects attack rolls and saving throws. Dark One's Own Luck affects ability checks and saving throws. That means we can modify ability checks, attack rolls, or saving throws. And the really interesting thing is, neither of these use a reaction, so they do not interfere with each other. That means if we fail a saving throw, we can use Dark One's Own Luck or Favored of the Gods. And if that isn't enough, then we can add the other one. So on average, that's adding more than 10 to a failed saving throw. Now, one way they are different. Favored of the Gods is using 2 dice. That means you're far more likely to get a number closer to the average. While Dark One's Own Luck is using a d10, meaning you have the same chance of getting a 10, a 5, or a 1. So which one do you use on a failed saving throw? Well, if you know how much you failed to save by, and usually you do. I mean, most of the time, at tables at least I've seen, the DM has made it pretty clear what the saving throw DC is. So when you make the saving throw in the first place, you know whether you've passed or failed on your own. If I realized that I failed by 2, 3, 4, or 5, I'd probably use Favored of the Gods. If it was a super important saving throw and I failed by more than 5, I would probably start with Dark One's Own Luck. It has a better chance of doing it in one go without having to use Favored of the Gods as well. By this point, we no longer want Hex, and we no longer want Shatter. And frankly, we don't even want Mirror Image anymore. I just don't want to be using a 3rd level slot to cast Mirror Image. Blindness, Deafness, I'm actually going to keep for now. Blindness, Deafness upcasts really well. You can target a second creature, and it is not using concentration, so it is a pretty impactful thing you can do when you're concentrating on something else. That actually gives us 6 3rd level spell selections. We're going to grab Counterspell, as I usually do. As I mentioned, we're going to grab Fireball. Fireball is a good way to take down enemies. We're going to want it when we are a 5th level Warlock, 6th level character. We're going to want it when we're a 6th level Warlock, 7th level character. I'm going to want Fly. Fly is a very useful spell, and it also upcasts really well. I am going to want Fear. Fear is a very strong spell. I am going to want Hypnotic Pattern. Hypnotic Pattern, probably my favorite 3rd level spell. 30-foot cube. Creatures make their save. If they fail, they are incapacitated, and their speed is 0, and there is no additional saving throw. And I'm going to take Summon Shadowspawn. Summon Shadowspawn is actually a pretty strong summoning spell. One thing about it is, it's one of the new ones that came out in Tasha's. One thing about those summons is they tend to have pretty lousy hit points. The Shadow Spirit has the best hit points of the lot of them. 35 hit points, 3rd level spell, and notice the scaling, 15 hit points per spell level. One thing you can do that's really nice with the Shadow Spirit is you choose the Despair form. And then you put the Despair form right beside your enemy, and when it begins its turn, it moves 20 feet slower, no saving throw. And then, of course, you do some damage, and it does have an area of effect, fear effect it can do once. And the last one I would take is Thunderstep. Now, I have Misty Step that does give me teleportation, but the big thing about Thunderstep and Dimension Door, which we will be switching this out for, is that we can take along somebody else. So if somebody's in trouble, you can use Thunderstep or Dimension Door to get them out of trouble. So at levels 6 and 7, we see a significant difference in our spellcasting ability. Fireball, of course, is huge to add at these levels because creatures often don't have so many hit points that Fireball isn't having a huge impact. But also, we are having the ability to Hypnotic Pattern, we have summoning spells, we can teleport other creatures. Our versatility in terms of spellcasting has leapt ahead. Now we can use Dark One's Own Luck on an initiative check. That might be the other thing we can do, because Dark One's Own Luck doesn't have the wording of Favor of the Gods that the check has to be a failure in order for us to adjust it. So we can adjust initiative rolls. If I have lost initiative to an enemy that I really wanted to beat on initiative by a point or two, then Dark One's Own Luck has a reasonable chance of pushing us on the other side of the initiative order. Favorite of the Gods, I don't think any to hit roll is going to be so important that I'd be using it. I'd be saving it for saving throws. So 2 more levels. Character's now level 9. We're going to level 8 in Warlock. So Investment of the Chainmaster, we are going to change for another Chain Pact Invocation, Gift of the Ever-Living Ones. Whenever you regain hit points while your familiar is within 100 feet of you, treat any dice rolled to determine your hit points you regain as having rolled their maximum value for you. Now on the surface, there's some value to this. If we drink a healing potion, normally you're rolling d4s. Well, they're treated as 4s. A little bit deeper, we look, and when we take a short rest and we expend hit dice, we are always going to be treated as having rolled the maximum amount on those hit dice. That means we can benefit from more short rests. We are a Warlock. Benefiting from more short rests is a very good thing, as long as those short rests are available. And even if they aren't, we can likely heal up to full, and we're very seldom going to have to spend over that half hit dice, which puts you in that dangerous point where if you take a long rest, you don't necessarily get them all back. Finally, if we get healed with, say, a Cure Wounds spell, and remember, we have a Cure Wounds spell. We took it with Sorcerer. So our Cure Wounds currently is a D8 plus our Charisma modifier because it's through Sorcerer. So right now it's a D8 plus 4. That's 12 if we cast it with a first level slot. But we could use a pack slot. And this is the main advantage because then what we could do is 4th level spell. Now it's 4d8 plus 4. 32 plus 4, that's 36 hit points with 1 4th level spell. That's really good and probably worth casting in combat. And then, of course, it'll scale again when we get to 9th level in Warlock. And then it's going to end up eventually being 45 hit points with 1 5th level spell. That's almost getting into the range of heal. And then we're going to take our level 7 option, and this is the point where we definitely want to get Repelling Blast. This is the level where we're going to start to get spells that we're going to want to push things into. So Repelling Blast, obvious choice here. And our ability score improvement here, we're going to take a feat, and that feat is going to be Charisma Telekinetic. And I talked about this with the last build. Telekinetic gives us the ability to push additional creatures beyond what our Eldritch Blast can do. We're not using our bonus action for anything right now. We no longer have Hex. We no longer have Investment of the Chainmaster. Bonus action is free. So Telekinetic, especially with the spells we're going to be casting, is going to be adding to our damage and our control. So we will be getting rid of Thunderstep. We'll probably do that right at becoming level 7 as a Warlock. And then we are going to replace it with Dimension Door. That's just a no-brainer. And we are going to pick up 2 spells right now, Sickening Radiance, Wall of Fire. I spoke in detail about killing creatures with exhaustion in my Genie video. If you didn't see that video, now's the time. I'm going to place the link right above. Take a look, because killing creatures with exhaustion is something unique that is not available to most classes. But a creature can have any number of hit points, and you can kill it with exhaustion using Sickening Radiance and Force Movement. In fact, if you have other characters in the party, like, maybe you've got Swarmkeeper Rangers or Druids with Thorn Whip or whatever, Sickening Radiance can kill creatures by exhaustion within a round. Even the super high challenge creatures, and it doesn't matter how many hit points they have. But if you do want to kill creatures by hit points, then Wall of Fire is our option. Wall of Fire does 5d8 damage when you first cast it, saving throw for half, but any creature that moves into the Wall of Fire on any turn after that takes that damage with no saving throw. That means every creature you push into the Wall of Fire with your Repelling Blast, and remember, right now we have 2, eventually we'll have 4, takes that extra damage automatically. And if you push a creature onto the other side of a Wall of Fire, well, if they need to get to you or they need to see you, then they're pretty much in the position where they have to go through it a second time to get out of the effect on their turn. So now that's 10d8 damage. Wall of Fire I generally find to be moderately useful if we can have the effect of the damage happen twice. If we can have 3 or more, it's really good. With Eldritch Blast, with Telekinetic, we should easily be able to do that in any major battle. Now, one thing to keep in mind is Wall of Fire is Dexterity saving throws. Sickening Radiance is Constitution saving throws, so that's also a factor in deciding which one you want to use. Now, Sickening Radiance does damage as well. It's going to do a lot less damage than a Wall of Fire. Wall of Fire is the way to do damage. Sickening Radiance is the way to kill by exhaustion. As a level 8 Warlock, you have 2 pack slots. Sickening Radiance, Wall of Fire, they're both 1 combat spells. So you're just going to have to make a decision. If you have 2 combats per short rest, you're fine. If you have more than that, you're not going to be able to use them in every fight, so you're going to have to pick and choose. Moving on to level 10. Time to grab Grasp of Vidar. The more movement things we have to control our enemies, the more damage we can do with them. And the thing about Grasp of Vidar is we could have a creature on the other side of a Wall of Fire. We could hit it with an Eldritch Blast. We can use Grasp of Vidar to pull it through the Wall of Fire. It takes the damage, no saving throw. Then we could use the Repelling Blast to push it back through the Wall of Fire. Now, it wouldn't take any damage because it's already taken damage that turn, but it is on the other side of the Wall of Fire again, so if it wants to get to you, then once again, it's got to come through. And then it will take the damage, no saving throw. Do remember, though, with Grasp of Vidar, it's only available once per turn. So if you hit multiple creatures with Eldritch Blast on your turn, you can only Grasp of Vidar one of them. That's why I don't think it's as good as Repelling Blast, but we already have Repelling Blast. And Grasp of Vidar does combine nicely with Repelling Blast. And a really nice feature at level 10 for Fiend Pact Warlock. In fact, every feature Fiend Pact Warlock gets is good. Fiendish Resilience included. Choose a damage type. You're resistant. Take a short rest or long rest and you want a different damage type? You're resistant. So we're going to attack some Mind Flayers. Better be resistant to Psychic. Oh, now a Red Dragon? Better be resistant to Fire. But I like getting resistance, no question about it. But when I get to choose my resistance and switch it out with a short rest, I mean, short rest isn't that hard. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to face, but by the end of your short rest, you have a pretty good idea what you're facing. And you can just pick the right resistance. So that's really, really handy. Now we are actually layering quite a few defenses here because our temporary hit points keep coming back each time that we down a creature to 0 hit points. And that's scaling nicely with our levels. We have the ability to heal ourselves quite a few hit points with a pack slot. And now we're adding resistance to damage. So those defenses are really layering up. Never mind the fact we have a pretty good armor class with the shield spell available. Blindness, Deafness, we do not want to be casting with 5th level slots. And Fireball, time for it to go. In fact, 9th level. Get rid of Fireball, and we are going to instead take Synaptic Static. Synaptic Static is going to do almost as much damage as Fireball. Might actually do more damage because it hits a weaker saving throw. Upcast Fireball would be doing 10d6 damage. This is going to do 8d6. Psychic is more reliable than Fire. And Synaptic Static has the effect where a creature that fails their saving throw has a minus d6 on their further attack rolls and any saving throws to maintain concentration. And that's kind of the main advantage of Synaptic Static, but it's still very comparable to what we'd be doing with a Fireball that has no secondary effect. So at 9th level, Fireball, Synaptic Static, make that trade. Now, you might look at Wall of Light and wonder if we should be taking that when we're doing things like Repelling Blast to push and pull creatures out of effects. No. Wall of Light is terrible. They take no damage if you push a creature into a Wall of Light, and they take no damage at the start of their turn. They just move out of it. Not worth it. And what about Flame Strike as a blast at this point? Again, just this one is actually worse than just keeping Fireball. It is smaller and it does less damage for the level of spell. So we would have been better keeping our Fireball than switching it to Flame Strike. So we definitely don't want that either. And so there are no other 5th level spells that we really need to get, but probably some 5th level spells we'll want to kind of pick up at some point. Before I do that, I will grab Banishment. Banishment, because it is a 4th level spell, when we cast it with a pack slot, it'll be automatically upcast, can affect 2 creatures, hits Charisma saving throws. We don't have other major spells affecting Charisma saving throws, and if they fail, they are banished and incapacitated. They're immediately going to lose concentration on any spell they had. And then when they return, there's no additional saving throw, so they return basically whenever we want within the duration. And when they come back, they'll find out all their friends and minions have all been destroyed, and we were surrounding the square they came back on, and they die. We're going to grab Fire Shield. Why? Well, because we have a type of resistance that we can move around, but Fire Shield would allow us to layer resistances. So we might have fire resistance and cold resistance, or fire resistance and bludgeoning resistance, depending on, the kind of thing we're fighting. So Fire Shield, also no concentration, good duration. By the way, we picked up a couple cantrips here, and there's nothing we need. So take whatever you want. I mean, you'll notice things like Mind Sliver and Minor Illusion haven't been selected. It's because we already have them through Sorcerer. So there's just nothing we need here. Maybe take Prestidigitation for some fun. Maybe, I don't know, Friends. It really doesn't matter. Take whatever you like. So we'll go to level 12 as Warlock, level 13 total. Level 11 is huge for Warlocks. It's the biggest level. They're Eldritch Blast. They get a 3rd one. They get a 3rd pack slot, and they get a 6th level spell. Now, when it comes to our pack slots, we have all the spells that I think you need. So now you pick up things that are, going to be once in a while. But it's not going to be much different than Genie Pact. We're just going to pick up the standard circumstantial spells, Contact Other Planes on there, Planar Bindings on there, Teleportation Circle is on there, Scrying is on there. So we'll just kind of be picking up those kinds of spells as we move on. If you want to see the entire list of circumstantial spells that I'm adding, I'm not going to go over it in the video, but the link to the completed characters in the video description. You can go see what I took. We'll be picking up Voice of the Chainmaster. This allows us to communicate with our Imp Familiar and perceive through its senses as long as we're on the same plane of existence, and we can speak through our Familiar. So basically we have a unlimited range drone. So our Mystic Arcanum at 11th level will give us a 6th level spell. I mentioned in the Genie Pact video that Mass Suggestion is the best option. I stand by that. I think Mass Suggestion is the best option for 6th level. I will today mention that there's some other options that I think are still okay. Mainly the one I'm thinking of is Scatter. Scatter can be a very, very useful spell. You target up to 5 creatures. If they're friendly, no saving throw needed. If they are unfriendly, they have to make a saving throw, Wisdom, and then you can just teleport all 5 around anywhere you like within 120 feet that you can see. This allows you to completely reset a battlefield. My one issue with Scatter as a Mystic Arcanum is we only get 1 Mystic Arcanum for each level spell. We can't use that 6th level spell for anything else. It's not like a spell slot where we could go, I'm not going to cast Scatter, so I guess I'll upcast this other spell. You don't get to do that with Mystic Arcanum. We either cast Scatter once per day or we lose it, right? So I'm not 100% convinced you're going to need scatter every day. That is the downside. Otherwise, scatter is a fantastic spell. But I do think it'll be useful enough that this is a reasonable second choice to mass suggestion. And the ability score improvement here, we're not going to take a feat. We're actually going to take ability score improvement, and we're going to increase our charisma up to 20, and we're going to increase our constitution up to 16. So that increases our bonus for both of them. So let's talk levels 13 and 14 with Warlock, now a level 15 character. 7th level Mystic Arcanum. Well, other than Force Cage, you might choose, just kidding. Force Cage is really the only choice here. There's nothing else that comes even close. I mean, I guess you could take Finger of Death, but you are really just messing yourself by not taking Force Cage. Force Cage is the clear winner here. And we get our final subclass feature, and this is my favorite subclass feature of the Fiend. Starting at 14th level, when you hit a creature with an attack, of course, we're firing 3 Eldritch Blasts per turn at this point. We're going to hit something with an attack. If there's one creature that we really want to hit, we'll hit it once. That's all we need. We hit it once. Then we can use this feature to instantly transport the target through the lower planes. The creature disappears and hurtles through a nightmare landscape. Notice there's nothing listed there about a saving throw because there isn't one. At the end of your next turn, the target returns to the space it previously occupied or to the nearest unoccupied space. If the target is not a fiend, it takes 10d10 psychic damage as it reels from its horrific experience. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. Okay, 10d10 psychic damage, reasonably reliable, no saving throw for half. You're going to take all the damage that I roll. I'll average 55 points of psychic damage. That's not bad, and that's the tiny part. The big part is the creature is essentially banished, right? Now, it technically isn't incapacitated, so if it is concentrating on something, it's not losing that concentration. But basically, you have a round. Your friends have a round. Everybody's got a round. And you can finish off enemies. You can set up bad things for him to come back to. I mean, including just stacking a bunch of really lousy stuff on his square. And he's not going to be counterspelling you or anything to prevent you from doing any of this stuff. And I've done this where we've fought a CR 30 creature, done Hurl Through Hell, and the fight is essentially over. By the time they came back, we were ready to go, and they were just screwed. And what I love here is there's no saving throw. You just do it. And it doesn't matter how tough it is. And we don't care about your legendary resistances or anything. All right, so up to level 16, we will get another Eldritch Invocation, and we will take Lance of Lethargy. That slows a creature by 10 feet. When we hit it with an Eldritch Blast, we can do that once per turn. This is the least of the various invocations I have, but it's not terrible. Mystic Arcanum 8th level. I mentioned this on the Genie Pact. None of these are fantastic spells. Maybe the best of them is Demiplane. Demiplane can be a pretty useful spell, but it's also a spell I don't necessarily expect to cast every day. If you want to take Feeble Mind or Dominate Monster, I completely would get behind that as well. I will go ahead and take Demiplane here. Demiplane is a very useful spell. You create an empty room, 30 feet in each dimension. You can fill anything in there, and then you can access it later on. Some people have mentioned to me that what you could do is you could put Glyphs of Warding in there that have beneficial buff spells, and then you could open a Demiplane, go in there and set them all off, and then you don't have to concentrate on anything. So there's that. But you know what? Even if you just use it the way the designers were thinking when they made this spell, it's still a good spell. We will then get an ability score improvement, and I think we should increase our wisdom saving throws. There's no feat here that is really important for us at this point, so I would get resilient wisdom, just because some DCs by this level get really high, so you want to have that additional bonus. And we're just going to add one more level of Warlock because that's all we're going to take. So we're going to go to level 17 to get our 9th level spell. And the 9th level spell, now with the Genie Pact Warlock, it was easy. It was Wish. Here, I think that it's a little bit harder, but I'll tell you what I wouldn't take. I wouldn't take Astral Projection or Blade of Disaster. Blade of Disaster isn't horrible, but I wouldn't take it. Imprisonment, definitely not. Power Word Kill is awful. Psychic Scream, definitely not. Though you can do a mass stun, but I still don't think it's worth a 9th level slot. I would be choosing between Foresight and True Polymorph. I do think True Polymorph is the stronger of the two, but Foresight is a pretty good spell. I mean, Foresight, I've seen it in action, lasts all day, and has a dramatic impact. True Polymorph, there's a little more you can do with it. I mean, it's just more flexible. Polymorph, you can even make it permanent. So, I mean, the classic is, turn your party into a bunch of adult gold dragons. You can do that. There's a lot of things you can do with True Polymorph. It's a flexible spell. So we've got 9th level spells. Do we want to continue with Warlock? Not really. I don't really need another feat, and I don't really need another invocation. I'm already kind of scraping the bottom. I have my maximum number of pack slots now. I've got 4 pack slots. It will never get higher. Do I need more spells known through pack magic? Absolutely not. I'm not even showing you what I took because who cares? So what will I do with my final 2 levels? I'll go back and I'll get Sorcerer 3. Why would I do this? For meta magic. Meta magic is available now, and we can take Subtle Spell and we can take Transmuted Spell. And Subtle Spell we want because it allows us to move past a counter spell. Of course, the whole idea of Subtle Spell is they don't notice you're casting. If they don't notice you're casting, then the trigger for counter spell is not active. The second thing about Subtle Spell is sometimes it's just useful to have things not know where a spell came from. And then Transmuted Spell, because we're still doing stuff like Wall of Fire damage. I mean, it's just something that we'll continue doing. It's 5th level now, so it's upcast by 1. It's not going to be our big play anymore. It used to be our big play. Now it's kind of standard combat thing. But fire damage is not reliable. Transmuted Spell allows us to make it something reliable. And if in doubt, choose Thunder. Thunder is the least commonly resisted of all these damage types. And what spells would I take? I'd take Tasha's Mind Whip, because with a pack slot, that's a 5th level Tasha's Mind Whip. It's pretty effective. Doesn't use concentration. And, I'd probably take Web. I mean, Web is immensely powerful at 3rd level. 20th level, it's not all that great anymore, but what the heck? I mean, I'm not sure. These are 2nd level spells. There are still cases where Web can be useful. So, as we finish up at 20th level, got 9th level spells, we've got Meta Magic, and our Eldritch Blast is crazy. It's pulling, it's pushing, it's making things slower. Ideally, we have a Rod of the Packkeeper to improve our chances to hit and our save DCs, but Wand the War Mage is also good on this build because a lot comes down to hitting with our Eldritch Blast. By the way, whenever we drop a creature to 0 hit points at this point, we're getting 22 temporary hit points as our 1st level Fiend Pack feature. So did you like the build? Just asking for a Fiend. And that's my primary Warlock build series, or mini-series I guess it is. As for me, I'm just going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody. Talk to you soon.